Welcome to St. James, an Antiochian Eastern Orthodox church. Today's homily is by Father Timothy Barkley, as recorded on May 25th, 2025.
In the name of the one true God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. My brothers and sisters, Christ is risen.
He is risen.
Pray for me, my brothers and sisters. It's our last chance to say, Christ is risen. That was not. We'll have one more at the end of the service, but savor it while you have it. Pascha season ends actually Wednesday before Vespers. But we're not going to have any services between now and then, except today. So enjoy. The resurrection life of Christ, though, does not cease to be our inheritance, our portion. In the life of a Christian, we are caught kind of in a now and not yet. On the one hand, Christ is risen. And on the other hand, we still walk here. We still suffer. We still, in our bodies, in our minds, in our emotions, in all of our being, we experience the effects of our own sin and of the sins of others that were enacted years, decades, millennia ago, that we had nothing to do with. In the time of Jesus, there was a belief that if something bad was going on with you, you must have done something bad, or your parents must have. It must be either your sin or your parents' sin, and you suffered for those things. In fact, there was even a notion in some of the rabbinic teachings that if a mother went into an idolatrous temple and sacrificed to an idol, the child in her womb was also an idolater because he was inside her when she was worshiping the idol. So therefore, they felt it was just of God to visit retribution on the child because the child, being in the mother, had in some way participated in the mother's sin. We see kind of a little reverberation of that in the Western notion that we inherit Adam's guilt. That because Adam sinned and we were in Adam when he sinned, therefore we are guilty along with Adam, and thus whatever we receive in our being as a result of sin is God's just retribution for the sin to which we are heir. Of course, the church teaches that that is heresy, that is great evil. And we have seen how that works its way out in cultures and peoples, and we know that that's not a positive thing to view folks as inherently guilty by virtue of their conception, and thus liable to punishment by virtue of the fact that they exist. Rather, we know that we come into this world under the influence of this thing we call death, but that we are not liable for sin until we choose to engage in that. We know that we are liable to death because our entire bodies are geared toward things like waste elimination. Everything about your body is made to get the good stuff in, keep the good stuff in, and get the bad stuff out. That's just part of our existence, and it's so much a part of our existence we don't even think about it. It's just part of being human, we think. One of the things that happened when Adam and Eve engaged in that first act of sin is that their bodies changed, radically so. There were no wastes to eliminate prior to sin. All of a sudden, their body had to accommodate death. And so their bodies changed. Our bodies are made to accommodate death. And we know that for about the first 18 years of our life, we are living faster than we're dying. We're making new cells and we're getting rid of the bad stuff faster than the bad stuff is multiplying. And for the rest of our lives, pretty much. I mean, it varies from person to person and all. But for the rest of our lives, mostly we're dying faster than we're living. When I used to sell insurance, we called that the death curve or the life curve. At the beginning, it was a real steep climb, and then there was this kind of long, gradual decline. And sometimes you would just kind of go on and on and on until you were 105 or 110, and sometimes you just drop off the planet. It'd be a very steep decline right at the end. You never know. But we do know that we're all subject to death. We're all gonna die. Unless, of course, Christ returns first and sweeps our bodies into the air, and then we will be part of the glorious redemption, the fullness and the finality of the redemption of the sons of God. But unless that happens, we will die. And while we're waiting for that inevitable moment, our bodies participate in death. Things happen to us. Things are part of our genetics, our DNA, that we had nothing to do with. That nobody we ever met or knew had anything to do with. We can say that somebody somewhere sometime may have been responsible for an act that caused this, but we'll never know them. But we can bless them. We can pray for them. We can even offer up our sufferings for their salvation. Like Jesus offered up his sufferings for our salvation. We can suffer and have others be saved. So let's talk about today's gospel reading with the blind man. First question out of the disciples' mouth. Who sinned, him or his folks? So that he was born blind. Born, as some of the commentators say, without even any eyeballs. Whose fault is this? And Jesus said, it's not about that. We're not talking about finding someplace, someone where you can assign blame and have life wrapped up in a tiny little box. Rather, life is about the works of God being manifest. Now we look at this and we read the story and we think the works of God being manifest is God healing the man's eyes. And that is a work of God. Only God could do that. As the blind man said to the Pharisees, this has never happened before. Only God can do this. This is clearly a work of God. But folks, that is not the only work of God here. Nor is it, I submit to you, the most important work of God here. Because people with eyes, but without a living communion with God, are no better off than people without eyes, without a living communion with God. Because in the final analysis, they end up in the same situation. Yes, it's more convenient to be able to see. It's more pleasant. It's easier. And I'm not suggesting that it means nothing when people lose their vision. Of course not. But I am saying that when this man's eyes were open, as we hymnodized, Christ, being of dual nature, human and divine, healed both this man's human nature, his eyeballs. He gave him eyeballs that worked. He also healed his soul such that he was able to partake of the divine nature. We can go to a doctor and we can get a pill for what's wrong with us, maybe, and get fixed and be all better in our body. But unless our soul is healed, in the long run, it's not that important. But because we can feel what's going on in our bodies and we can see what's going on with other people, somebody who can't see, you can see that. They have a white cane and they go around. So you can see that. It becomes obvious. It becomes evident. You can't see what's wrong with somebody's soul. You can see sometimes the people are meanies. They act poorly. But that doesn't necessarily reflect the nature of their soul. They might just be having a bad day. So because of that, when Jesus came to heal someone's inner parts, he would often also heal their outer parts, so that his deity became manifest, so that you could see that this was God. Because one of the signs of the coming of the Messiah from the Old Testament was that the blind would see. And the blind man pointed that out to the Pharisees. Hello, you who know the law. What just happened to me is a sign that this guy is the Messiah. And they said, how dare you lecture us and tell us what the law says? They were blind. After we didn't read quite to the end of this little vignette, some of the Pharisees came up to him and said, well, are we blind? And he said, yeah. And what's more, you're not just blind, you are full of sin. He said if you couldn't see, you wouldn't have sinned. But because you say we can see, your sin remains. They're blind and they're blind in their sin. Folks, we need both. I mean, let's be honest. If you're suffering and physically, being healed physically is good. We ask God for that because it's a good thing. But if He, in His providence and in His love for us and His compassion, doesn't choose to heal us, we still have the goal before us. Because in Hebrews it says to fix our eyes, what? Not on our physical status, our physical health, our bank account, where we live, what we drive, who we associate with, what we wear. It says fix your eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before Him endured the cross, despising its shame. He thumbed his nose at it. What was the joy set before Him? We just studied this on Wednesday night, so I'm cheating. I read ahead. The joy set before Him was that we would be incorporated into His family as His brothers and sisters. That was the joy set before Him that was so overwhelming that He could be tortured to death and counted as nothing because of you. Because He saw you and He wanted you so badly as His co-inheritor of the divine nature that the cross was a small price to pay, that He might have the great joy of you and me, but mostly you. That's why He was on the cross. Yes, He was there out of obedience to His Father. Yes, He was there out of generalized love. But He was there, folks, specifically and personally. Because love is not a generalized thing. Love that is a generic kind of thing is not love. It's just kind of goodness or something, or kindness. Love always has an object, and the object is always particular. Christ hung there on the cross for you. My grandmother, God bless her, God rest her soul, she used to say, I always rejoice that if I were the only person on earth, Jesus still would have come and suffered and died for me. And you can argue that point theologically, but fundamentally it's true, because He did. He did come and suffer and die for her particularly, not just for people generically. He came and He gave Himself for you, individually, each one. How do we respond to Christ's infinite self-giving for each of us particularly? When I know that He gave Himself for me, uniquely and particularly, how do I handle that? What does a healthy person do when he finds out that God poured out all of Himself for me? Is it maybe just a touch of gratitude? Maybe just a little bit of desire to reciprocate? Maybe it adjusts my priorities so that I see that the things that I thought were important are not important, that this is what's important. It's easy, folks, for us to treat all this stuff as generic, kind of theological theorems and things. Folks, this is personal in particular. It's about each one of us. We have to grapple with that right now, right now, because for most of us in this room, in about 15 minutes, we will physically partake of the divine life. What are we going to do to prepare ourselves for when He enters into us and becomes part of us? How do I make myself ready for that? And how do I respond when the priest says, the body and blood of Christ, and puts Him in your mouth? What's that all about? We need to grapple with that, folks. Of course, there are answers to that. Things like we should be grateful, yes. We should be overwhelmed. We should be filled with all the fullness of God. Not because God's going to get mad if we don't, but because that's what healthy people do. We need to be healthy. Jesus came to create healthy siblings, to call us into his family, that we might be his brothers and sisters, co-inheritors of all of the glory of God. So what does that mean when I'm tempted? When I go out of here, or even when I'm still in here, and I'm tempted to whatever the thing is I'm tempted to? What do I do? How do I respond? What do I think of that temptation? Is that my flesh? Is it the passions? Is it the demons out there after me? How do I respond when I am tempted to do that which is not worthy of a sibling of the Son of God? He wouldn't do it. Why would I? Why would I? I got my, folks, we got to get our priorities kind of realigned. We are children, co-inheritors of the kingdom. When we're tempted, we just need to laugh in its face. Hello, I'm a son of the king. I'm sorry, but the son of the king does not countenance that. So I'm not doing that. You can wear yourself out, passion or demon or whatever, but I'm not interested in what you have on offer. Thank you. And that doesn't mean that it gets easy. It may mean that it gets harder. But that's okay. Because this is, after all, a war with an enemy who is what we call implacable, cannot be made peaceful towards us. Okay, so that's where we are. That's who we are. That's what we're doing. I don't want anybody to think that Father said that if you just kind of decide to do the right thing, life will become a bed of roses. It will not. It will be very difficult. It will be a struggle for your salvation and for mine. But we struggle together, we walk together, we encourage one another, we lift one another up in prayer, we stand together, we exhort one another. Brother, don't do that. Sister, that's not worthy. Let me remind you of who you are. Let me remind you of the resplendent glory that is yours. Why would you go there and do that? It's not worthy of you as a child of the King. And then we will go forth into the world. Jesus said he is the light. And he also said that those who believe in me, out of their belly will flow rivers of living water. We read from John 9 today. It was in John 8. We can go into the world and shine forth light. And out of us will flow rivers of living water, that the world might be saved. That, yes, we might be saved. But folks, there's a whole world out there that's waiting for us, that is yearning for salvation. We need to go into the world and shine forth the light of Christ and pour forth living water. That's our calling. That's our inheritance. Glory to Jesus Christ.
Thank you for listening. Come worship with us at 30 York Street in Taneytown, Maryland on Sundays at 10 a.m. or visit our website at stjamesorthodoxchurch.org.